the channel where drama sizzles and revenge burns hotter than ever. If you love jaw dropping twists, bold characters, and stories that keep you guessing till the end, you're in the right place. Subscribe and dive into gripping tales of betrayal, karma, and ultimate payback. Get ready for unforgettable moments and satisfying endings, only on Crazy Pepper. Hit that bell and let the drama begin. They say you never really know someone until you see how they treat the waiter. But I learned something darker that night at the Sinclair family dinner. You never really know your wife until you hear how she talks about you when she thinks you can't hear. My name is Nick Teller, and I'm what you might call a hidden millionaire. Not the flashy kind with gold watches and loud cars, but the quiet type who built a logistics empire from a single delivery truck. $7 billion in assets, spread across shell companies and offshore accounts. My wife Allison doesn't know. Her family doesn't know. And that ignorance was about to cost them everything. The Sinclair mansion sat on 12 acres of manicured Connecticut countryside, all white columns and old money pretension. I pulled my modest Honda into the circular driveway, parking between a Mercedes and a BMW like a rust stain on silk. Allison had been unusually quiet during the drive, checking her makeup in the mirror more than necessary. "Remember," she said, applying another coat of lipstick, "Uncle Caleb will be here tonight. He's been so helpful with my charity work." Uncle Caleb. The man wasn't even related to them, just some family friend who'd earned the honorary title through decades of brown-nosing. Caleb Foster, 46 years old, son of the president of First National Bank, and the kind of man who wore his privilege like a cologne, expensive and overwhelming. The front door opened before we could knock. Margaret Sinclair, Allison's mother, stood in the doorway wearing a smile that could freeze champagne. She was 62, but fought it with the desperation of a woman who'd never worked a day in her life. "Allison, darling." She embraced her daughter with the theatrical warmth reserved for public displays. Then her eyes found me. "And Nicholas, how nice." The pause before nice lasted just long enough to sting. We entered the foyer, all marble floors and crystal chandeliers that probably cost more than most people's cars. The house smelled of old money and fresh flowers, a combination designed to remind visitors of their place in the social hierarchy. "Everyone's in the sitting room," Margaret announced, leading us through hallways lined with oil paintings of dead Sinclairs. "Your father is discussing business with Caleb. Such a brilliant man, that Caleb. Harvard Business School, you know." She said Harvard the way other people said Holy Scripture. The sitting room was a monument to understated wealth, Persian rugs, leather-bound books that had never been read, and furniture that whispered old money in every carefully chosen thread. 3 people looked up as we entered. Richard Sinclair, Allison's father, sat in a wingback chair like a king on his throne. At 68, he still carried himself with the bearing of a man who'd never been told no by anyone who mattered. Beside him stood Caleb Foster, and I felt that familiar twist of irritation in my gut. Caleb was everything I wasn't supposed to be. Tall, perfectly groomed, with the kind of confident smile that came from generations of inherited success. His suit probably cost more than most people made in a month, and he wore it with the casual arrogance of someone who'd never questioned his place in the world. The third person was a surprise. Miranda Walsh, one of Allison's closest friends, sat curled in a corner chair with a wine glass already half empty. She was 35, divorced twice, and had made gossip into an art form. "Nick," Caleb's voice boomed across the room with false enthusiasm. "Good to see you again, buddy." Buddy, like we were fraternity brothers instead of 2 men who barely tolerated each other. "Caleb," I replied, accepting his handshake. His grip was firm, practiced, designed to establish dominance. I squeezed back just hard enough to let him know I wasn't impressed. "We were just discussing the quarterly reports from the bank," Richard said, not bothering to stand. "Quite impressive numbers this quarter. Of course, you wouldn't understand the complexities of high finance." The dismissal was casual, almost offhand. To them, I was just the blue-collar husband who'd somehow tricked their daughter into marriage. A high school graduate who'd gotten lucky in the delivery business. If only they knew. "Oh, I'm sure Nick has his own perspectives on money," Caleb said with a smirk. After all, managing a small business requires its own kind of skills. Small business. My logistics company employed over 3,000 people across 15 states, but to them it was just small business. Actually, I said, settling into a chair, I find finance fascinating, especially the psychology of it. How people's perceptions of wealth often have nothing to do with reality. Caleb's smile flickered for just a moment. Well, perception is often reality in our world, isn't it? Reputation, connections, breeding. These things matter more than raw numbers. Breeding? I raised an eyebrow. Are we talking about people or horses? The room went quiet. Margaret's wineglass paused halfway to her lips. Richard's face darkened like a storm cloud gathering strength. Nicholas! Allison's voice carried a warning. Uncle Caleb was just explaining how important family connections are in business. Of course, I said, my voice carefully neutral. Nothing like a good family connection to open doors that talent alone might not. Caleb's laugh was sharp. Talent is important naturally, but without the right background, the right education, the right connections, well, there are limits to how far a person can go. The condescension dripped from every word. To him, I was living proof of those limits. The high school graduate who'd reached his ceiling and should be grateful for whatever scraps fell from their table. Speaking of limits, Richard interjected, I heard you do your banking at our little branch downtown. First National, isn't it? That's right, I confirmed. Charming, he said, the word loaded with meaning. Such a modest institution for modest needs. Caleb chuckled. Dad always says you can tell a lot about a man by where he banks. The downtown branch handles mostly small accounts. Nothing wrong with that, of course. Everyone has their place in the ecosystem. Their place in the ecosystem. I was plankton. They were whales. You know, Caleb continued, warming to his theme, I've been telling Allison she should consider moving her accounts to our main branch. Better services, better connections. Of course, there are minimum balance requirements. He let the implication hang in the air. I wasn't worthy of their main branch. How much would someone need to qualify for the main branch? I asked innocently. Oh, it varies, Caleb said with false modesty. But generally, we're looking at accounts in the 7-figure range. Serious money, you understand. 7 figures. If only he knew he was talking to someone whose accounts made his family's wealth look like pocket change. That does sound exclusive, I said. What happens if someone with, say, an 8 or 9-figure account wanted to bank there? Caleb's laugh was genuinely amused now. 8 figures? Nick, that's $10 million minimum. 9 figures would be $100 million. We're talking about serious wealth here, not the kind of money ordinary people deal with. Ordinary people. The phrase hit exactly as intended. You're right, I said, standing up slowly. Man, that is serious money. Too serious for someone like me. Now, Richard said with patronizing kindness. There's nothing wrong with being ordinary, Nicholas. The world needs working people. You provide a valuable service with your delivery business. Delivery business. $3 billion in annual revenue reduced to delivery business. You know what? I said, my voice perfectly calm. You've convinced me. I think I should close my account at First National. Clearly, I'm not the right fit for your institution. The room erupted in laughter. Even Allison giggled behind her hand. Oh, Nick, Caleb wheezed, wiping his eyes. Close your account? What are you going to do? Cost us dozens of dollars in lost fees? Maybe even hundreds, Richard added, his own laughter booming. However will the bank survive? Margaret was practically in tears. Nicholas, you're so dramatic. It's almost charming. Miranda raised her wineglass in a mock toast. To Nick's economic protest. I'm sure the banking industry is trembling. I looked around the room at their laughing faces, memorizing every detail. The way Caleb's eyes crinkled with genuine amusement. The way Richard slapped his knee like I'd told the funniest joke he'd ever heard. The way Allison looked at me with something dangerously close to embarrassment. You're probably right, I said quietly. It wouldn't make much of a difference. But as I saw, I was already planning. They thought they knew who I was, what I was worth, where I belonged in their carefully ordered world. They were about to learn how wrong they were. The laughter continued as Margaret announced dinner was ready. As we moved toward the dining room, I caught fragments of whispered conversation. Poor Allison, married to that, at least he knows his place. I'll never understand what she saw in him. But it was what I heard next that changed everything. As I pretended to admire a painting in the hallway, I overheard Allison talking to Miranda in the powder room. their voices carrying through the slightly open door. God, sometimes I wonder what I was thinking. Allison's voice was sharp with whine and frustration. At least Caleb understands what it means to be successful. He is rather impressive, Miranda agreed. All that old money confidence? Very attractive. You have no idea, Allison said, and something in her tone made my blood freeze. He's been so attentive lately, especially during our private meetings about the charity. Private meetings? The charity work that kept her out 3 nights a week. Allison, Miranda's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. You're not saying what I think you're saying, are you? There was a pause. Then Allison's laugh, low and secretive. Let's just say that old money definitely has its advantages. Nick's so focused on his little delivery routes, he has no idea what real success looks like. The words hit like physical blows. My wife, my partner of 8 years, talking about another man with the kind of closeness that belonged to me. Talking about me like I was some pathetic charity case she'd outgrown. I stepped back from the door, my mind racing. The pieces were falling into place now. The late nights, the new clothes, the way she'd started looking at me like I was a disappointment she was too polite to mention. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd assumed I was powerless. They'd assumed I would take their contempt lying down. They'd assumed wrong. As we sat down to dinner, I smiled and made polite conversation. I laughed at their jokes and nodded at their stories. But inside, I was planning their destruction. They wanted to see what real money looked like. They were about to get a front row seat. The morning after the dinner party, I sat in my home office staring at my computer screen. The numbers glowing back at me told a story that would have made the Sinclairs choke on their silver spoons. $7.2 billion in assets spread across 43 accounts in 12 countries. Not bad for a high school graduate with a little delivery business. But money was just the beginning. What I needed now was information. My assistant, Jenna Martinez, knocked on the doorframe. At 28, she was sharp as a blade and twice as cutting when she needed to be. More importantly, she was loyal. I'd hired her 5 years ago when she was fresh out of business school and drowning in student debt. Now she ran my operations with military precision. You look like someone who found a dead body in their coffee, she said, settling into the chair across from my desk. Worse, I found out my wife is cheating on me. Jenna's expression didn't change. She'd never liked Allison, though she'd been professional enough to keep it to herself. With who? Caleb Foster, son of the president of First National Bank. The same bank where you keep your public account? The very same. She was quiet for a moment, processing. What do you need? This was why I valued Jenna. No sympathy, no platitudes, just straight to business. I need surveillance. Nothing illegal, just information. Where they meet, when they meet, how often. I also need you to start moving assets. If this goes where I think it's going, I want to be prepared. How prepared? I turned my monitor toward her. Her eyes widened as she took in the numbers. Jesus Christ, Nick. How long have you been hiding this? Since before I met Allison. Old habit from growing up poor. Never let anyone know what you're really worth. And now? Now I'm going to teach some people about the difference between old money and real money. Jenna grinned. It wasn't a pleasant expression. This is going to be fun. Over the next week, I maintained my normal routine. I went to work, came home for dinner, made small talk with my cheating wife. But underneath the surface, I was gathering intelligence. Jenna's surveillance was thorough and discreet. Caleb and Allison met twice a week at the Grandview Hotel downtown, always the same suite, always charged to one of Caleb's credit cards. They'd been doing it for 4 months. 4 months! While I'd been working 16-hour days to build our future, she'd been building a future with someone else. The breakthrough came on a Thursday evening. I was in my study when I heard Allison on the phone in the kitchen. Her voice carried that particular tone women use when they're talking to their girlfriends about men. I know it's complicated, Miranda, but you don't understand what it's like being married to someone so ordinary. I moved closer to the kitchen, staying in the shadows. Caleb makes me feel like I'm worth something, Allison continued. Like I deserve better than a husband who thinks a nice dinner is Olive Garden. I'd taken her to Olive Garden once, early in our relationship, because she'd said she wanted to try it. Apparently that was now evidence of my inadequacy. The Zex is incredible too, she added, her voice dropping to a whisper. There's something about a man who knows his worth, you know? Nick's so grateful all the time. Like he can't believe someone like me would be with someone like him. The phone conversation continued, but I'd heard enough. I retreated to my study and called Jenna. Change of plans, I said when she answered. I want to accelerate the timeline. What happened? I just listened to my wife describe our marriage as a charity case she's outgrown. It's time to close my account at First National. There was a pause. All of it? Every penny. Nick, that's going to cause some serious waves. Your account represents about 12% of their total deposits. Good. I want them to feel it. The next morning, I dressed carefully. Not my usual casual clothes, but a tailored suit I'd bought for board meetings. Expensive, but not flashy. The kind of understated wealth that whispered instead of shouting. First National Bank occupied a full city block downtown, all glass and steel designed to intimidate. The lobby was marble and mahogany, with the kind of hushed atmosphere that made people speak in whispers. I walked past the teller windows to the elevator, heading for the executive floor. The receptionist was a blonde woman in her 50s who looked like she'd been hired for her ability to make people feel unwelcome. Can I help you? She asked, her tone suggesting she hoped the answer was no. I'd like to speak with Mr. Gates about closing an account. Mr. Gates is the bank president, she said slowly as if explaining to a child. He doesn't handle routine account closures. You'll need to speak with a customer service representative. This isn't routine. Sir, I'm sure you think your account is special, but my account number is 7743-821-994-87. She typed it into her computer, and I watched her expression change from boredom to confusion to something approaching panic. I need to make a phone call, she stammered, reaching for her phone. 5 minutes later, I was sitting in the most luxurious office I'd ever seen. William Gates, president of First National Bank, sat across from me, looking like a man who'd just been told his house was on fire. Gates was in his 70s, with the kind of deep tan that came from yacht ownership and the soft features of a man who'd never missed a meal. His hands shook slightly as he poured coffee from a silver service. Mr. Teller, he said, his voice carefully controlled, I understand you're considering some changes to your banking arrangements? That's right. I want to close my account. All of it? Every penny. Gates set down his coffee cup with trembling fingers. Mr. Teller, perhaps we should discuss this. If there's been some service issue, I'm sure we can resolve it. No service issue. I've just decided your bank isn't the right fit for my needs. But sir, your account, it's one of our largest. The withdrawal of that amount of capital would have significant implications for our operations. I leaned back in my chair, studying him. This was the man whose son had laughed at the idea of me closing my account, who'd called me ordinary, and suggested I knew my place in the ecosystem. Mr. Gates, does your son work here? The question caught him off guard. Caleb? Yes, he's our vice president of private client services. Why do you ask? Just curious. I met him at a dinner party recently. Interesting, young man. Gates relaxed slightly, misreading my tone. Yes, Caleb's very talented. Harvard Business School, you know. He's being groomed to take over the bank eventually. I'm sure he is. Tell me, what would happen if I withdrew my funds today? The color drained from Gates's face. Today, Mr. Teller, a withdrawal of that magnitude requires significant preparation. We'd need to liquidate positions, call in loans. It would take weeks to arrange. How long exactly? At least 30 days, possibly longer. I stood up, straightening my jacket. You have 24 hours? Sir, that's impossible. The regulatory requirements alone, then I guess you'd better start making some phone calls. I walked to the door, then paused. Oh, and Mr. Gates? You might want to have a conversation with your son about customer relations. Some of his comments at the Sinclair dinner party were illuminating. I left him sitting there, and I could feel his panic following me out of the office like a physical presence. That evening, I was in my study when Allison came home from her charity meeting. She looked flushed and happy in a way that made my stomach turn. How was your day? She asked, kissing my cheek with lips that had probably been on another man an hour earlier. Interesting, I said. I went to the bank today. Oh? Everything okay with the account? Actually, I decided to close it. She laughed, the same dismissive sound I'd heard at the Sinclair dinner. Nick, you can't just close a bank account because your feelings got hurt. Watch me. Something in my tone made her look at me more carefully. What's that supposed to mean? It means I'm tired of being treated like I don't matter. By the Sinclairs, By their friends, by their precious Caleb Foster. Her face went pale at Caleb's name. Nick, you're being ridiculous. Uncle Caleb was just what? Explaining my place in the ecosystem? Reminding me that I'm ordinary? You're taking this too personally. Am I? Because from where I sit, it feels pretty personal. Allison stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her calculating, trying to figure out how much I knew, how much I suspected. Nick, she said finally, her voice soft and conciliatory, I think you misunderstood what happened at dinner. Everyone was just having fun. No one meant to hurt your feelings. My feelings aren't hurt, Allison. They're clarified. What does that mean? It means I'm done pretending to be something I'm not. She looked confused, which was understandable. She thought she knew who I was, what I was capable of. She was about to learn otherwise. My phone buzzed with a text from Jenna. Bank stock down 3% in after-hours trading. Word is getting out. I smiled, and something about that smile made Allison take a step back. Nick, you're scaring me. Good, I said quietly. It's about time someone in this family felt a little fear. The next morning brought chaos disguised as a phone call. I was in my kitchen drinking coffee and reading the financial news when my phone rang. The caller ID showed William Gates's direct line. Mr. Teller. His voice was strained, desperate. We need to talk. I thought we did talk. 24 hours, remember? Sir, please. What you're asking is impossible. The regulatory requirements, the liquidity issues, we'd have to call in loans, liquidate investments. The ripple effects would be catastrophic. I took a sip of my coffee, savoring both the taste and his panic. Sounds like a management problem, Mr. Gates. Mr. Teller, I'm begging you to reconsider. Perhaps we could arrange a graduated withdrawal schedule? Or maybe there's something else we could offer? Better rates, premium services. Actually, there's something you could offer. Hope crept into his voice. Anything. Name it. An apology. What? From your son. A public apology for his comments about ordinary people knowing their place? The silence stretched for nearly 30 seconds. When Gates finally spoke, his voice was careful, measured. Mr. Teller, I'm not sure I understand what you're referring to. Ask Caleb about the Sinclair dinner party. Ask him about his thoughts on breeding and ecosystems. Ask him how hard he laughed when I said I'd close my account. Another silence. Then, I'll speak with him. You do that. In the meantime, the clock is ticking. I hung up and immediately called Jenna. How are we doing with the asset transfers? I asked. 60% complete. The offshore accounts are taking longer, but we should have everything moved by end of business today. Good. What about the surveillance? Interesting development there. Caleb and Allison met yesterday, but not at their usual hotel. They went to his office after hours. His office? Top floor of the bank building. Corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows. I felt a cold smile spread across my face. Send me the photos. 20 minutes later, I was staring at high-resolution images of my wife and her lover in Caleb's office. Nothing explicitly sexual, but the body language told the story. The way she leaned into him, the way his hand rested on her lower back, the way they looked at each other, like they shared secrets. But it was the last photo that stopped my breath. Caleb had Allison pressed against his desk, his mouth on her neck, her head thrown back in obvious pleasure. The bank's logo was clearly visible on the wall behind them. I forwarded the photos to a secure email account and started planning my next move. At noon, I drove to the bank. The lobby was buzzing with unusual activity, hushed conversations between executives, worried looks from tellers, the kind of barely controlled panic that comes when an institution realizes it's in serious trouble. I took the elevator to the top floor, walking past the receptionist who recognized me from yesterday. She started to object, but when I was already through the door to Gates's office, I found him on the phone, his face red with stress and exertion. I don't care what the regulations say. We need to find the liquidity somewhere. He looked up and saw me, his expression shifting from anger to something approaching terror. I'll call you back, he said, hanging up. Mr. Gates, you look stressed. Mr. Teller, please sit down. We need to discuss this rationally. I'm feeling very rational. Have you spoken with your son? Gates's face darkened. I have. He admits that perhaps some comments were made in poor taste. Poor taste. That's one way to put it. Mr. Teller, Caleb is young. Sometimes he speaks without thinking, but that's no reason to destroy an entire institution. I leaned forward. Mr. Gates, do you know what I do for a living? You run a delivery company. I run the third largest logistics operation in North America. My trucks carry goods for 70% of the Fortune 500. My warehouses store inventory for companies you shop at every day. My systems move products from factories to stores to homes across 15 states. Gates stared at me, processing this information. Last year, I continued, my company generated $3.2 billion in revenue. We employ over 3,000 people. We operate a fleet of 1,200 vehicles and maintain facilities in 47 cities. The blood drained from his face. But to your son, I'm just some ordinary guy who knows his place. A high school graduate who should be grateful for whatever scraps fall from your table. Well, tell her I had no idea. Of course you didn't. You never bothered to find out. You saw the modest house, the simple clothes, the state school education, and you made assumptions, just like your son did. I stood up, straightening my jacket. You want to know what's really funny? I've been banking here for 8 years. 8 years of steady deposits, never a bounce check, never a late payment. And in all that time, not one person at this bank ever bothered to ask what I actually did for a living. Sir, if we had known, you would have treated me differently, which is exactly the problem. I walked to his window, looking down at the street below. Your son is having an affair with my wife. The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. What? I turned back to face him. Caleb and Allison have been meeting twice a week for 4 months. Hotels, restaurants, his office. Yesterday, they were in his office after hours. Would you like to see the photos? Gates looked like he was going to be sick. Mr. Teller, I don't know what to say. Here's what you're going to say. You're going to call your son and tell him his services are no longer required at this bank. You're going to explain that his personal conduct has created a liability the institution can't afford. I can't fire my own son over an alleged affair. Alleged? I pulled out my phone, showing him one of the photos. Does this look alleged to you? Gates stared at the image of his son with my wife, his face cycling through disbelief, anger, and resignation. Even if what you're saying is true, he said quietly, firing Caleb won't solve our liquidity problem. No, it won't. But it might convince me that this bank takes customer service seriously. And if I refuse? I smiled. Then at 3 p.m. today, I withdraw every penny. Your bank stock, which is already down 6% since yesterday, will crater. Your depositors will panic. Your board of directors will demand answers you don't have. And by Friday, First National Bank will be a footnote in financial history. The threat hung between us like a blade. You're destroying lives over hurt feelings, Gates said desperately. I'm not destroying anything. I'm simply taking my business elsewhere. The fact that my business represents 12% of your deposits isn't my problem. It's yours. I headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and Mr. Gates, you might want to change the locks on Caleb's office. I'd hate for any more compromising photos to surface. I left him sitting there, staring at the photo of his son and my wife, and took the elevator down to the lobby. As the doors opened, I nearly collided with Caleb himself. He was rushing toward the elevators, his face flushed with anger and panic. When he saw me, he stopped dead. You, he said, his voice tight with rage. Me, I agreed pleasantly. You think you're clever, don't you? Threatening my father, trying to destroy our bank? I'm not trying to destroy anything. I'm just a customer exercising his right to bank elsewhere. Bees, this is about dinner the other night. You can't handle a little friendly teasing, so you're throwing a tantrum. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Caleb, let me explain something to you. This isn't about teasing. This isn't about hurt feelings. This is about respect and consequences. Consequences? He laughed, but it sounded forced. What consequences? You're nobody, a delivery driver with delusions of grandeur? You're right, I said quietly. I am nobody. Just like the 3,000 people who work for me. Just like the hundreds of companies that depend on my services. Just like the billions of dollars that flow through my accounts. His laughter died. But here's the thing about being nobody, I continued. Nobody has nothing to lose. And a man with nothing to lose is the most dangerous man in the world. I started to walk away, then turned back. Oh, and Caleb, you might want to stay away from your office for a while. I hear there are some compromising photos floating around. The color drained from his face as the implications hit him. I walked out of the bank into the afternoon sunshine, feeling lighter than I had in months. Behind me, I could hear Caleb shouting something, but I didn't look back.
My phone buzzed with a text from Jenna. Asset transfer complete. All accounts closed. Bank stock down 11% and falling. I smiled and typed back, Phase 1 complete. Time for Phase 2. As I drove home, I thought about what came next. The Sinclairs, Miranda, all the people who'd laughed at the idea of ordinary me making a difference. They were about to learn that ordinary people could be extraordinary when pushed too far. But first, I had a conversation to have with my wife. I arrived home to find Allison in the kitchen, her phone pressed to her ear and her voice tight with stress. She was pacing back and forth, her free hand gesturing wildly, even though whoever she was talking to couldn't see her. I don't understand what you're saying, Caleb. What do you mean, fired? Your father can't just fire you? I set my keys down loudly enough for her to notice me. She spun around, her face pale and eyes wide with something between fear and guilt. I have to go, she said into the phone, then hung up without waiting for a response. Rough day? I asked, opening the refrigerator and pulling out a beer. Nick, we need to talk. I'm listening. She took a deep breath, and I could see her organizing her thoughts, preparing her defense. Caleb called me today. He said you went to the bank and caused some kind of scene. Scene is a strong word. I had a conversation with his father. About what? I took a long drink of beer, studying her face. She was beautiful. I had to give her that. Even stressed and frightened, she had the kind of polished elegance that came from good breeding and expensive maintenance. Too bad it was all surface. About customer service, I said finally. About respect. About the consequences of treating people like they don't matter. Nick, you're scaring me. Caleb said his father fired him over something you said. Actually, I think it was over something you two did. The words hit her like a physical blow. She staggered backward, her hand reaching for the counter to steady herself. I don't know what you're talking about. Corner office, top floor, yesterday after hours. Should I continue? Her face went through a series of expressions: denial, calculation, defiance, and finally resignation. How long have you known? She asked quietly. Long enough. Nick, I can explain. Can you? Because I'd love to hear this explanation. She sat down heavily in one of the kitchen chairs, suddenly looking older than her 38 years. It wasn't supposed to happen, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. It just did. For 4 months? Her head snapped up. You've been watching me. I've been protecting my interests. Your interests? Anger flared in her eyes. Is that all I am to you? An interest? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Rich question coming from someone who's been screwing another man for a third of a year. She flinched at the crude language. In 8 years of marriage, I'd never spoken to her that way. It's not about Zex, she said desperately. It's about connection, understanding. Caleb gets me in a way you never have. He gets you. That's beautiful, Allison. Really touching. Don't be sarcastic. This is hard enough. Hard enough? You know what's hard? Finding out your wife thinks you're ordinary, that she's embarrassed by you, that she talks about you like you're some charity case she's outgrown. Tears started streaming down her face, but I felt no sympathy, not anymore. I never said that. No? What about your conversation with Miranda? The one where you talked about how grateful I am. Like, I can't believe someone like you would be with someone like me. She went completely still. You heard that? Every word. Nick, I was venting. I didn't mean, you meant every word. Just like you meant it when you told her about Caleb's advantages. Just like you meant it when you called me ordinary. I finished my beer and set the bottle down on the counter with deliberate precision. Here's what's going to happen, I said, my voice calm and controlled. You're going to pack a bag and stay somewhere else for a while. I need time to think. This is my house, too. Actually, it's not. The deed is in my name. It has been since we bought it. Her face went white. You can't just throw me out. I'm not throwing you out. I'm asking you to leave voluntarily. There's a difference. And if I refuse, then I'll have to consider my options. Something in my tone made her look at me more carefully. For the first time since I'd known her, she seemed to really see me. Not the ordinary husband she'd taken for granted, but the man who'd just destroyed a bank's stock price with a single phone call. Who are you? She whispered. I'm exactly who I've always been. You just never bothered to look. My phone rang. The caller ID showed Marcus Webb, one of the city's most expensive divorce attorneys. I'd called him earlier from the bank parking lot. Excuse me, I said to Allison, then answered the phone. Marcus. Nick, I've reviewed the preliminary information you sent. We need to meet as soon as possible. How soon? Tonight, if possible. What you're describing is complex. I'll be there in an hour. I hung up and found Allison staring at me with undisguised horror. A divorce lawyer? She said. Nick, please, we can work this out. We can go to counseling. We can what? Pretend the last 4 months didn't happen? Pretend I didn't hear you talking about another man like he was everything I'm not? I made a mistake. People make mistakes. This wasn't a mistake, Allison. This was a choice. A series of choices made over months. I headed for the door, then paused. By the way, you might want to call your parents, let them know their precious Caleb won't be inheriting the bank after all. What does that mean? It means the ecosystem just shifted, and ordinary people like me are about to show you what real consequences look like. Marcus Webb's office occupied the top 3 floors of a downtown high-rise, all glass and steel and intimidating views. The man himself was in his 50s, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, with the kind of predatory intelligence that made him worth $500 an hour. Nick, he said, rising from behind a desk that could have doubled as a landing strip. Sit down. Tell me everything. I spent the next hour laying out the situation. The affair, the humiliation at the dinner party, the bank account, the photos. Marcus listened without interruption, occasionally making notes on a legal pad. This is quite a story, he said when I finished. Your wife has no idea about your real net worth? None. As far as she knows, I'm a small business owner with a modest income. And you can prove the affair? Photos, credit card receipts, hotel records. My assistant has been thorough. Marcus smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. Nick, I have to ask, what exactly do you want out of this? I want her to understand what she's lost. I want her family to understand what they've lost. I want Caleb Foster to understand that actions have consequences. Revenge, in other words, justice. There's a difference. Justice is proportional. Revenge is personal. Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying me. What you're describing sounds pretty personal. Maybe, but it's also proportional. Explain. They treated me like I was nothing, like I was ordinary, forgettable, beneath their notice. So I'm going to show them what nothing can do when it decides to fight back. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, then smiled. I like you, Nick. You're going to make this very interesting. We spent another hour discussing strategy, asset protection, evidence gathering, public relations. Marcus was thorough, creative, and completely ruthless. One more thing, he said as I prepared to leave. Are you prepared for this to get ugly? Because it will. Your wife's family has money and connections. They'll fight back. Let them. They'll try to destroy your reputation, your business, your life. They can try. You sound confident? I smiled. Marcus, they think they know who they're fighting. They think I'm some ordinary guy who got lucky in business. They have no idea what they're actually up against. And what are they up against? Someone who built $1 billion empire from nothing. Someone who's been underestimated his entire life. Someone who's very, very good at playing the long game. Marcus grinned. This is going to be fun. As I drove home, I thought about what came next. The Sinclairs would circle the wagons, trying to protect their daughter and their precious Caleb. Miranda and the other society friends would choose sides. The whole social structure that had dismissed me as ordinary was about to discover just how extraordinary ordinary could be. But first, I had one more conversation to have with my wife. I found her in our bedroom, packing a suitcase with shaking hands. She looked up when I entered, her eyes red from crying. I'm going to stay with my parents, she said without looking at me. Good choice. Nick, please, can't we at least try to work this out? I sat down on the edge of the bed, watching her fold clothes with mechanical precision. Allison, do you know what the worst part of this is? She stopped packing and looked at me. It's not the affair, I continued. It's not even the lying. It's the fact that you never once, in 8 years of marriage, bothered to find out who I really am. I know who you are. No, you know who you decided I was? The ordinary husband, the high school graduate, the man who should be grateful for your attention. That's not fair, isn't it? When was the last time you asked me about my work? Really asked, not just polite conversation. She was quiet. When was the last time you showed any interest in my thoughts, my dreams, my plans for the future? Still quiet. You married a version of me that existed only in your head. A safe, ordinary man who would worship you and never challenge you and never, ever surprise you. I stood up, straightening my jacket. Well, surprise, I said quietly. You never knew me at all. I left her there, packing her things and crying, and went downstairs to my study. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. The next morning brought the first casualty report. Jenna called me at 7 a.m., her voice bright with malicious satisfaction. First National stock opened down 18%, she said without preamble. Trading was halted twice in the first hour. The financial news is calling it unexplained massive capital flight. Any word from Gates? 3 voicemails and 17 emails. He's begging you to call him back. Let him beg. What about Caleb? Escorted out of the building yesterday evening. Security footage shows him carrying a cardboard box and looking like someone shot his dog. I smiled, sipping my coffee. Phase 2? Already in motion. The photos you wanted distributed have been sent to key members of their social circle. Nothing explicit, just intimate enough to start conversations. Good. What about the charity board? Miranda Walsh received a very interesting package this morning. Photos, financial records, a timeline of the affair. She's calling an emergency board meeting for this afternoon. The Grandview Country Club Charity Board. Allison's pride and joy. The social circle that defined her identity. Miranda was the biggest gossip in the group, which made her the perfect delivery system for information. Jenna, you're brilliant. I know. Oh, and Nick? Channel 7 wants to interview you about the bank situation. Apparently, someone leaked that a single large depositor caused the crisis. Set it up for tomorrow. I want to give the story time to develop. After hanging up, I drove to my office. The logistics center was a sprawling complex of warehouses and loading docks, busy with the controlled chaos of commerce. Trucks arrived and departed in carefully orchestrated waves, carrying goods across the country. Most people saw it as a delivery business. They had no idea they were looking at the nervous system of American retail. I was reviewing quarterly reports when my assistant knocked. Mr. Teller, there's a woman here to see you. Says she's Miranda Walsh. Miranda stood in my office doorway looking like she'd seen a ghost. She was usually perfectly put together, but today, her makeup was smudged and her hands were shaking. Nick, she said, her voice barely controlled, we need to talk. Miranda, this is unexpected. Is it? After the package you sent me? I gestured to a chair. She sat down, clutching her purse like a lifeline. Those photos, she said. Are they real? What do you think? I think Allison is my friend. I think she's made a mistake, but that doesn't give you the right to destroy her life. I leaned back in my chair, studying her. Miranda was 42, twice divorced, with the kind of brittle beauty that came from too much surgery and not enough happiness. She'd always treated me like furniture, present, but not worth noticing. Miranda, let me ask you something. In the 5 years you've known me, have you ever once asked what I do for a living? You run a delivery company. Do I? Look around. She glanced around my office for the first time, really seeing it. The expensive furniture, the wall of monitors, showing real-time logistics data, the frame photos of warehouses and distribution centers across multiple states. I don't understand. Of course you don't. You never bothered to understand. Just like Allison never bothered, just like her parents never bothered. Nick, I know you're hurt, but hurt? I laughed. Miranda, I'm not hurt. I'm educated. There's a difference. What does that mean? It means I've learned something valuable about the people in my life, about their character, about their loyalty, about what they really think of me. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the loading docks below. Do you know what Allison said about me? To you on the phone? Miranda's face went pale. She said I was ordinary, that I should be grateful someone like her would be with someone like me, that Caleb understood what real success looked like. She was upset. People say what they really think when they believe no one important is listening. I turned back to face her. The question is, Miranda, what are you going to do about it? What do you mean? I mean the charity board meeting this afternoon. Are you going to stand by your friend, or are you going to do what's right? I don't see how this is a charity board matter. I smiled. Allison has been using charity events to conduct her affair, meeting Caleb at fundraisers, using charity business as cover for hotel meetings. She's turned your organization into her personal dating service. Miranda's mouth fell open. That's not... She wouldn't... Check the records. Cross-reference the dates of her meetings with Caleb against charity events. You'll find some interesting patterns. I walked back to my desk and pulled out a folder. Or save yourself the trouble. It's all in here. She took the folder with trembling hands, scanning the documents inside. Her face went from pale to white to green. "Oh my God," she whispered. "The Children's Hospital Gala, the literacy fundraiser. While we were trying to help people, she was using your good work as cover for infidelity, yes." Miranda looked up at me with something approaching horror. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because you have a choice to make. You can protect your friend, or you can protect the integrity of your organization. But you can't do both." She was quiet for a long moment, staring at the evidence in her hands. "What do you want from me?" she asked finally. "I want you to do the right thing, which is remove her from the board. Make it clear that the charity won't tolerate this kind of behavior. Send a message that actions have consequences. And if I don't, then I'll be forced to make this information public. Channel 7 is very interested in stories about charity corruption." The threat hung between us like a blade. Miranda understood the implications. Her own reputation was tied to the charities. If this became a scandal, she'd be destroyed along with Allison. "You're blackmailing me. I'm offering you a choice. There's a difference." She stood up slowly, still clutching the folder. "I used to think you were a nice man. I am a nice man. To people who deserve it. And I don't deserve it? Miranda, in 5 years of knowing you, you've never once treated me like I mattered. I've been background noise at parties, invisible at dinners, someone to be tolerated for Allison's sake. Now you want me to be nice?" She had no answer for that. "The board meeting is at 3, I continued. You have until then to decide what kind of person you want to be." After she left, I called Jenna. "How did it go?" she asked. "Phase 2 is in motion. What's the status on the media strategy?" "Channel 7 confirmed for tomorrow morning. The Business Journal wants an interview about the logistics industry, and someone from the Wall Street Journal called about the bank situation." "Perfect. By tomorrow, everyone will know exactly who they've been dealing with." That afternoon, I sat in my car outside the country club watching the charity board members arrive for their emergency meeting. I could see the tension in their body language, the way they clustered together in small groups, whispering urgently. At 3:15, Allison's car pulled up. She got out slowly, her face set in determined lines. She'd dressed carefully, conservative suit, minimal makeup, the picture of wronged innocence. My phone buzzed with a text from Jenna. "Audio surveillance active, you'll hear everything." Through the earpiece, I listened as the meeting began. Miranda's voice was shaky, but determined as she laid out the evidence. Allison's denials became increasingly desperate as the other board members asked pointed questions. "This is a private matter," Allison said, her voice tight with stress. "My personal life has nothing to do with my charity work." "But it does," came Miranda's reply. "You use charity events as cover for an affair. You compromise the integrity of our organization." "That's not true. The evidence says otherwise. Hotel receipts charged to charity accounts, meeting schedules that coincide with your appointments. You've made us all complicit in your deception." There was a long silence, then the sound of papers shuffling. "The board has voted," Miranda announced. "Your resignation is effective immediately." Through the window, I watched Allison emerge from the club 20 minutes later. Her careful composure had cracked. She was crying, her makeup ruined, her hands shaking as she fumbled for her car keys. I felt a moment of something that might have been sympathy. Then I remembered her laughing at the dinner party, calling me ordinary, describing Caleb's advantages to Miranda. The sympathy died. My phone rang. It was Marcus Webb. "Nick, we have a problem." "What kind of problem?" "The Sinclairs have hired Thomas Blackwood." I whistled low. Blackwood was the most expensive, most ruthless divorce attorney in the state. He specialized in destroying people who threatened old money families. "They're not playing around," Marcus continued. "Blackwood filed papers this morning. They're claiming you've been hiding assets, that you're mentally unstable, that you've been abusive. They want a restraining order and emergency alimony." "Let them try." "Nick, you don't understand. Blackwood doesn't just practice law. He practices warfare. He'll try to destroy your business, your reputation, everything you've built." "Good. Good? Marcus, they still think they're fighting the ordinary guy from the dinner party. They have no idea what they're actually up against. And what are they up against? Someone who's been preparing for this fight his entire life. That evening, I sat in my study reviewing financial reports when the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Richard Sinclair standing on my porch, his face red with rage. "You son of a witch," he said without preamble. "You think you can destroy my family?" "Mr. Sinclair, this is unexpected." "Cut the act, Nicholas. I know what you're doing. The bank, the charity, the lawyers. You're trying to ruin us because your feelings got hurt." I stepped aside, gesturing for him to enter. He stalked into my living room like a man preparing for battle. "Can I offer you a drink?" "I want answers. Why are you doing this?" I poured myself a scotch, not offering him one. "I'm not doing anything except protecting my interests." "Protecting your interests? You destroyed a bank. You got Caleb fired. You humiliated my daughter in front of her friends. Actually, your daughter humiliated herself. I just provided the evidence. She made a mistake. People make mistakes." That's what she said. Funny how mistake is the word everyone uses for deliberate choices they regret. Richard's face was getting redder. "You have no idea who you're dealing with, boy. My family has connections you can't imagine. We can destroy you." "Really? How? Business licenses, permits, regulatory investigations? We can make your life a living hell." I smiled. "Mr. Sinclair, do you know what my company does? You run trucks. I run the logistics network for most of the major retailers in this region. Walmart, Target, Amazon, Home Depot, they all depend on my systems. If my trucks stop rolling, store shelves go empty." His confidence flickered. "Do you know what that means?" I continued. "It means I employ union drivers, warehouse workers, mechanics. It means I have contracts with dozens of suppliers and vendors. It means I generate tax revenue for 15 states and 47 cities." The color was draining from his face now. "So please," I said pleasantly, "tell me more about these connections of yours. Because I'm very curious to meet the politician who's willing to shut down the supply chain for Walmart to help you cover up your daughter's affair." Richard stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the moment when he finally understood what he was really dealing with. "Who are you?" he whispered. "I'm exactly who I've always been. You just never bothered to find out." He left without another word, and I watched from my window as he sat in his car for 10 minutes, making frantic phone calls. Tomorrow, the real war would begin. The Channel 7 interview was scheduled for 9 a.m., but by 8:30, my office parking lot looked like a media convention. News vans from 3 networks, reporters with cameras, financial journalists with notepads. Word had leaked about the bank situation, and everyone wanted the story. I dressed carefully for this moment. Not the expensive suits I wore to board meetings, but simple clothes that projected competence without arrogance. The ordinary guy who'd turned out to be extraordinary. Mr. Teller, the Channel 7 reporter, was a sharp-eyed woman named Jessica Chen. "Can you tell us what prompted you to withdraw your assets from First National Bank?" "Customer service," I said simply. "I was treated with disrespect by bank employees who made assumptions about my worth based on my appearance and education." "Can you be more specific?" "I was told that I knew my place in the ecosystem, that ordinary people like me should be grateful for whatever attention we received from our betters." The camera caught every word, every inflection. "And your response was to withdraw how much money?" "Enough to matter. Reports suggest it was over $1 billion. I don't discuss specific figures, but yes, it was substantial. Mr. Teller, some people are saying this was an overreaction, that you've damaged a respected institution over hurt feelings." I smiled. "Jessica, let me ask you something. If you went to a restaurant and the waiter treated you like garbage, would you go back? Probably not. This is the same principle, just with more zeros involved." The interview continued for 20 minutes, covering my background, my business, my philosophy about respect and consequences. I came across as reasonable, articulate, and completely justified in my actions. By noon, the story was viral. Social media exploded with discussions about class warfare, hidden wealth, and the arrogance of old money institutions. Ordinary. Revenge was trending on Twitter. But the real fireworks came that afternoon. I was in my office when Jenna burst in without knocking, her face flushed with excitement. "Nick, you need to see this." She turned on the conference room television, tuning to the local news. A breaking news banner scrolled across the bottom. "Bank president resigns amid scandal." The reporter stood outside First National Bank, which was surrounded by federal investigators. William Gates announced his resignation this morning following revelations about improper lending practices and potential conflicts of interest. Sources close to the investigation suggest that Gates approved several questionable loans to family members and associates, including a $2 million loan to his son Caleb Foster that was never properly documented. I stared at the screen, pieces falling into place. Jenna, did we know about this? No, but it makes sense. When you force them to liquidate assets quickly, they had to call in loans. Someone probably discovered the irregularities during the audit. The reporter continued. Foster, who was terminated from his position as vice president earlier this week, is now under investigation for bank fraud. Federal agents executed search warrants at his home and office this morning. My phone rang. It was Marcus Webb. Nick, are you watching the news? I'm watching it. This changes everything. If Caleb is under federal investigation, Allison's association with him becomes a major liability. How major? Conspiracy charges if they can prove she knew about the fraud. Asset forfeiture if they can trace any of the money to her. This isn't just a divorce anymore. It's a criminal matter. I felt a cold satisfaction spreading through my chest. I hadn't planned this, but I'd created the conditions that made it inevitable. What's our next move? We wait, let the federal investigation play out. In the meantime, we document everything and prepare for whatever comes next. That evening, I was working late in my study when I heard a car in the driveway. Through the window, I saw Allison getting out of her mother's Mercedes, moving like a woman walking to her execution. She let herself in with her key, calling my name softly. I'm in the study, I replied. She appeared in the doorway, and I was shocked by her appearance. In just a few days, she'd aged years. Her face was drawn, her eyes hollow, her usual perfect grooming replaced by the look of someone who'd stopped caring about appearances. Nick, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. We need to talk. I'm listening. She sat down across from my desk, her hands folded in her lap like a schoolchild called to the principal's office. I saw the news about Caleb. Interesting development. Did you know about the bank fraud? I looked at her carefully. No, but I'm not surprised. What does that mean? It means that people who think rules don't apply to them usually break more than one rule. She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. They're saying I might be involved, that I might have known about the money. Did you? No. I never knew anything about bank business. I thought he was just successful. Successful men don't usually need to steal money to maintain their lifestyle. I didn't know he was stealing, but you knew he was married. The words hit her like a slap. That's different, is it? You were both betraying people who trusted you. The scale is different, but the principle is the same. Tears started flowing down her cheeks. Nick, I'm scared. The lawyers, the investigation, the reporters calling. I don't know what to do. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. What do you want from me, Allison? I want my husband back. I want my life back. I want to fix this. Some things can't be fixed. Please. I know I made mistakes, but we can work through this. We can go to counseling. Allison, stop. The firmness in my voice cut through her desperation. Do you know what the worst part of this is? I asked. She shook her head. It's not the affair. It's not even the lying. It's the fact that you're only here because you're scared. Not because you love me, not because you're sorry, but because your world is falling apart and you need someone to save you. That's not true, isn't it? If Caleb wasn't under investigation, if the bank hadn't collapsed, if your friends hadn't turned on you, would you be here right now? She opened her mouth to protest, then closed it again. You'd still be with him, I continued. Still talking about ordinary me and extraordinary him. Still planning your future with old money and good breeding. Nick, please. You made your choice, Allison. You chose him over me. You chose his world over ours. You chose to believe that I was ordinary, and he was special. I stood up, walking to the window. Now you want me to save you from the consequences of that choice. But here's the thing about consequence. They're not negotiable. What does that mean? I turned back to face her. It means I'm done being your safety net. Done being the ordinary husband you settle for when extraordinary doesn't work out. So what happens now? Now you figure out how to save yourself. She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her processing the finality in my voice. You're really going to divorce me. The papers were filed this morning, but the investigation, the media attention, and if you divorce me now, it'll look like you're abandoning me when I need you most. Good. The cruelty of that single word seemed to break something inside her. She started crying harder, her careful composure finally cracking completely. I loved you, she sobbed. I really did love you. No, I said quietly. You loved the idea of me, the safe choice, the ordinary man who would worship you and never challenge you and never, ever surprise you. I walked to my desk and pulled out a folder. But you never loved me, because you never knew me. I handed her the folder. She opened it with shaking hands, her eyes widening as she saw the contents. Financial statements, asset listings, corporate documents. $7 billion, I said. That's what you walked away from. That's what you thought was ordinary. Her face went white. This can't be real. It's very real. Every penny earned, every investment documented, and every acquisition legal and proper. But how? You're a truck driver. I'm the owner of the third largest logistics company in North America. I employ 3,000 people. I move goods for 70% of the Fortune 500. I built an empire while you were planning charity luncheons. She stared at the papers, her hands trembling. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted to be loved for who I was, not what I was worth. But I did love you. You loved a version of me that existed only in your imagination, the grateful husband, the ordinary man who should feel lucky to have you. I took the folder back from her nerveless fingers. Well, congratulations, Allison. You got exactly what you wanted. You found someone extraordinary. Someone with old money and good breeding and Harvard education. How's that working out for you? She couldn't answer. She just sat there crying, the weight of her choices finally crushing her. The locks will be changed tomorrow, I said. Your belongings will be packed and delivered to your parents' house. My attorney will be in touch about the divorce proceedings. Nick, please. Goodbye, Allison. She left without another word, and I watched from my window as she sat in her car for 20 minutes, crying and making phone calls that no one seemed to answer. The next morning brought the final piece of the puzzle. Jenna called me at dawn, her voice bright with vindictive satisfaction. Caleb Foster was arrested an hour ago. Federal charges of bank fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering. The FBI found $2 million in hidden accounts and evidence of at least 6 other fraudulent loans. What about Allison? Clean so far. Looks like she really didn't know about the money. But her association with him has made her toxic in their social circle. The country club revoked her membership yesterday. I smiled, feeling the last piece of my revenge clicking into place. Jenna, I want you to do something for me. Name it. I want you to buy First National Bank. There was a long pause. The whole bank? The whole bank. Their stock is worthless now. Their assets are being liquidated, and they're desperate for capital. We can probably get it for cents on the dollar. And then what? Then we turn it into the kind of institution that judges people by their character, not their pedigree. The kind of place where ordinary people get extraordinary service. Nick, that's brilliant, but also incredibly petty. I prefer to think of it as poetic justice. 6 months later, I stood in the lobby of what was now Teller Community Bank, watching as customers conducted their business in an atmosphere genuine respect and professional courtesy. The marble and mahogany were gone, replaced by comfortable furniture and friendly service. William Gates was working as a teller at a branch across town, having lost his house, his reputation, and his retirement in the federal investigation. Caleb Foster was serving a 7-year sentence in federal prison. Allison had moved back in with her parents, her divorce settlement limited to whatever she'd brought into the marriage. The prenup I'd insisted on 8 years earlier had protected my assets completely. Richard and Margaret Sinclair had stopped speaking to me entirely, which I considered a blessing. And me? I was exactly what I'd always been, a successful businessman who'd built something from nothing. The only difference was that now everyone knew it. My phone buzzed with a text from Jenna. Channel 7 wants to do a follow-up story. From ordinary to extraordinary, how one man's revenge became justice. I smiled and typed back, set it up. I have a story to tell. Because sometimes the ordinary guy really does win. And sometimes the people who should have known better learn exactly what they lost.
부산 지금 날씨 영하 5도거든요. 진지하게. 말해줬어요. 감사합니다. 진지하게. 서울 하면 맨몸 등산 갑니다. 그러니까 팬티만 입고? 그렇지. 팬티만 입고? 지랄하지 마. 그거 안 돼. 형 1000개 쏘시면 맨몸 등산할게요. 지랄하지 마. 근데 팬티 안 되지 않나? 안 와도 상관없음. 팬티 말고 안 와.
진지하게.
에드블루 한 거 감사합니다.
감사합니다 형님.
짜양 씨가 해준 거야. 감사합니다.
저 형은 왜 애들 풍선 쏘지?
몰라?
애들로 얼마나 써봐야겠다.
거기서 받을 수 있어.
마약 게임 보는데.
아씨
10원이래잖아 한 개가. 이씨.
110원? 야 그래도 중계 어디야?
이제 110원은
돈이 나오면 많이 싸줄게. 무슨 돈이요?
알바 말하는 거 아님?
알바비? 지금 일한 25일에 헐 감사합니다. 가봅시다. 손 존나 시려.
근데 남한산성은 진짜 고라니랑 멧돼지 아직까지 나오는 거 아시죠?
멧돼지 나오면 바로 잡을게요.
근데 진지하게 나와요 형들. 불 아니에요 니마이.
니마이.
니마 쌈마로 나옵니다 형님들. 진짜 진지하게 나오거든요. 근데 거기서 10만원 쏘시면 제가 맨몸으로 간다는 말이긴 한데 혹시 어떻게 쏘시나? 정상까지긴 함.
근데 정상까지 맨몸이면 1시간 걸리잖아.
그치. 1시간 반? 근데 이 형님 어차피 쏠 수는 없어요 10만.
근데 아까 너무 많이 줘가지고.
근데 안 줘도 돼요. 남한산성 가면 또 노상 갔을 때 그때 생각나는 거 같네.
노상?
예전에 경찰 한번 왔었는데
경찰 왔어? 올라왔어?